All right. So today is Monday, April 20th, and we're going to be looking at practice essay 6. In other words, how to write it, but how to pre-write it. We already went through this unpacking the prompt before you wrote the essay, and now I'm going to take you kind of through how I pre-wrote it and some tips for you working on a computer instead of working on with a printed piece of paper. Obviously, when you open the exam in May, you're going to see a topic on a screen. And if you have a printer and you have a couple minutes, it might be worthwhile to print it so you can write on it. But if you don't have a printer, you don't need one because you can just cut and paste, or you can write things down that you see in the text. So first, once again, we want to look at the prompt. The first paragraph is going to have some basic information about the book that the passage comes from. The second paragraph will focus you towards a thesis, and then the third paragraph, just very basic directions. So the first paragraph of the prompt: in many dystopian novels, the authors criticize conditions in their own society by showing how the future would change for the worse if those conditions do not improve. In Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, one of Huxley's themes is criticism of the ways in which governments were pushing the use of technology in the hopes that people would lose emotional contact with one another. Without those emotional connections, people would have no loyalty to anyone other than the government. Okay, so that's something we should have in the back of our mind now. How is the government using technology to cut emotional ties between people? Next, we get more specific about the passage. Consider this passage from chapter 14, in which John the Savage goes to visit his mother, Linda, in the last minutes of her life. In what ways does the passage reflect this theme of the government working to cut off emotional ties between people? Okay, so your thesis is going to answer this question. Yes, the passage shows that the government is trying to cut off emotional ties between people. And you can put devices in your thesis statement if you want or not. It says you may, and may means you don't have to, but that's kind of a clue. You may want to include such devices as imagery and paradox in your discussion of the overall tone. You have 40 minutes to write now some of you did this. Do not write a body paragraph about imagery and then write a body paragraph about paradox. Don't do that because they're going to overlap. In fact, a couple of you ended up using the same quote in both body paragraphs because you organized it this way. So if I'm going to read this from a computer, I might pull out some quotes that I can use. Okay, I'm thinking in my mind of anything that shows either false emotion or cut off emotion. Okay, well, here's one: a convoy of gaily colored aerial hearses. So I'm going to open a tab for pre-writing. I'm going to put my quotes there. Okay, what's a hearse? Well, that's that vehicle you see people going to, that they take the body to. They're usually black or white. They're usually not happily colored, but here they are. The room that Linda's dying in is bright with sunshine and yellow paint. Doesn't make sense. Linda was dying in company and with all the modern conveniences. In other words, she doesn't just have people around her in her company. She's also got conveniences, appliances, machines keeping her around her. There's a TV. I like this idea of TV as a running tap. A tap is like the faucet in your kitchen. That's a tap where you get water. Put that down. We keep going. Okay, every quarter of an hour, the prevailing perfume of the room was changed. If you've ever been to a hospital, or especially a nursing home, you know the smell there. I mean, they a lot of times will put some Febreze out, but that's on top of a smell that's just not very pleasant because, the process of dying is not pleasant and involves a lot of smells that aren't pleasant. Okay, then we get into this conversation that the Savage, or John, has with the nurse. Okay, where is she? The nurse is offended. You were in a hurry. Is there any hope? You mean of her not dying? No, of course there isn't. When somebody's sent here, there's no hope. Looks like we're missing a word there. Startled by the expression of distress on his pale face, she broke off. Why, whatever is the matter? I'm going to pull this whole thing. I'm not going to use it because I don't want to quote that long. I'm going to pull it, and then I'm going to deal with that in a minute. Okay. And then he says, she's my mother. And the nurse glances at him. I'm going to pull that whole thing too. I'm not going to use the whole quote, but I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to break it up over here. Okay. So now let's see what we can do to break these things down. So I'm going to leave expression of distress, and then she breaks off. She asks, what's the matter? She's not accustomed to this kind of thing in visitors. This sentence is kind of clunky, so I'm going to pull it out. I don't think I would quote it, so I'm going to get rid of it. You're not feeling ill, are you? Okay. I like this image of startled, horrified eyes at those, just because he said he's talking about his mother. And then she's all one hot blush. Okay. Now, how can I break these quotes into two? How can I, if I'm thinking about two body paragraphs, how can I split these up? Well, these quotes all have to do with the room. They all have to do with the room where Linda's dying, or at least the hospital, because this is from outside. So since that's from outside, I might get rid of that because I want to be focused with my quotes. So, and then down here, this is the kind of the mood of the room. And then down here is the conversation between the nurse and the savage, John. So I'm going to make some space here. So these are going to be my quotes that I use. Okay, so I know my thesis. Government uses, and I might not use this word for word, but this is just keeps me thinking. Government uses technology to cut emotional ties between people. So, and then body paragraph number 1 is going to be in this room. All about the room. Body paragraph 2, the savage and the nurse. There are my quotes. Okay, and that's what I'm going to use to write this. So next, here's a sample essay I wrote. I also uploaded some 3 model essays that got 6s. 3 model essays that got 6s. So take a look at those too, because those writers also did a terrific job of taking on the topic. So here's my hook. We'll make the hook blue. While the invention of new forms of technology brings the promise of improving our lives, it also brings potential barriers between people. When we sit and scroll on Facebook or Snapchat, we read the posts of others without having to emotionally engage or respond, because there is an emoji we can use to acknowledge the post on a much more superficial level. Okay, you've seen those, the thumbs up, the heart, the smiley face. Okay, remember, a hook is something that engages the present day reader. Okay, they haven't necessarily seen the passage or read the passage, but they've picked up your essay and might be interested enough to read it. That's the purpose of a hook. Aldous Huxley foresaw these dangers as he wrote Brave New World, in which a world state would benefit from a society in which people are conditioned not to feel emotional loyalty towards anyone or anything except the constant cycle of work and consumption. Okay. So I'm going to put my, put my context in orange. So something about Brave New World. And please do not copy the paragraph of information that the prompt gives you about the book. Because remember, on the test, you're probably going to be from a novel you haven't read. Don't just copy that context. Kind of take that and put it in your own words. And then my thesis, I'm going to put in red because my thesis is the most important part. Everything's got to follow it. In this passage from chapter 14, the Savage's visit to the Park Lane Hospital for the Dying shows how successful the world state has been in severing emotional ties and how grotesque that success turns out to be. Okay. Now, my topic sentence number 1 for body paragraph number 1. The hospital in which Linda, the Savage's mother, is spending her final days shows the ways in which the world state has managed to replace genuine emotion with a saccharine glow that keeps people vaguely comfortable without having to engage emotionally with one another. How do I know I've tied back to that thesis? Well, looky there and looky there. Okay. Linda is not dying alone. Now I'm getting into Q1. Linda is not dying alone. She is dying in company and with all the modern conveniences, including a television that is left on a running tap from morning till night. And remember, why do we use those brackets? Well, we write about literature in the present tense. So if you can, you want to move your verbs into the present tense in quotes. And you also can use brackets to smooth up quotes so you can put them together in your writing. Now my C1, the fact that conveniences, machines, provide one with company might be the central paradox of this passage, as there is absolutely no emotional return from a device. Remember, your comments also need to come back to your thesis, no matter how much comfort the device provides. The use of a running tap to describe the television compares the flow of distraction to the life-giving flow of water, suggesting that distraction is an absolute necessity in a society such as this. And then I'm going to Q2. The sensory atmosphere of the room also diverts attention from the series of individual marches towards death taking place in the room. The room is bright with the sunshine and yellow paint, and every quarter of an hour, the prevailing perfume of the room is automatically changed. The infusion of light along with warm colors is designed to distract people in the room from any sense of darkness, and the frequent change of odor takes the attention of the dying away from the unpleasant smells that often come from people in the last stages of life. This distraction and taking attention away, that's where I'm getting back to my idea of severing emotional ties. Because if I'm distracted, I'm not feeling a particular emotion. I'm just like, oh, okay. I'm not having to pay attention. Overall, this room is designed to keep the dying from feeling any emotion as they enter their final moments, kept in a calm, regulated, not just by soma, but also by the droning television and the shifting scents. So that concluding sentence is very important. Some of you, again, didn't put that on the end of your body paragraphs, so you need to do it. And I've used the metaphor in class many times. If you watch a football game where a team is not tackling, they're not wrapping up, they hit the runner or they hit the receiver, but they don't bring them down because they don't wrap their arms around them. That's what a lot of these paragraphs are like if you don't finish the job with that concluding sentence. Let's get into body paragraph 2. It is clear that the nurse with whom the Savage visits has gone through the sort of emotional conditioning that teaches her not to feel emotions. Now here, I would ding myself because I've repeated that word emotions. I would cause her not to experience feelings, or I need a better word. I need to vary my word choice here to get that, to make sure I get that polished point. But I certainly am tied to my thesis. When the Savage appears alarmed that his mother is about to die, she asks why, whatever is the matter, because she is not accustomed to this kind of thing in visitors. Most visitors, as there are not many, apparently come in and leave without any sort of emotional demonstration. Remember, my comments always need to tie back to my thesis, every time. So this display in the Savage vaguely alarms her because in her society, emotion does not make this sort of appearance. Once the Savage explains to the nurse that Linda is his mother, the stark nature of emotional disconnect in the world state becomes even clearer. That the nurse would respond to him with startled, horrified eyes and respond so that from throat to temple she is all one hot blush suggests that the idea of a mother is something forbidden to her. If the idea of having a mother or identifying a person as one's mother is so hard for her to hear, that suggests that the government has succeeded in cutting off even the most basic channels of emotional loyalty. because that tie between child and mother, that may be the most basic emotional connection that children have and need in infancy. And if you sever that, then you've severed, perhaps the most basic emotional tie. Throughout this passage from Brave New World, it is clear that the government has managed to cut off people from one another emotionally. Now, again, I could have varied my word choice a little bit more. That's probably the thing I'm least happy with. But I put myself on a time clock, much like you guys have to put yourselves on a time clock to pre-write and write through the use of technology. One irony of this passage is the similarities between that society and our own. And here's my so what. Many people find it difficult to visit their loved ones in hospital settings such as this because they have a difficult time handling their emotions in those times. The difficulty of seeing a loved one brought so low by disease makes these visits brief and uncomfortable. As more and more technology comes into our lives, it will be interesting to see if our interactions with dying relatives and friends become as sparse as those in Huxley's world. So, kind of pointing out, and your so what should point out why this is an important topic that we should be reading about and writing about, why it's important for us. So, your so what could have been a personal story. So you can go in several different directions. It just needs to show that you feel the topic, the theme in the passage is important and why. So there's the model essay. There are some suggestions on pre-writing. Then we will go back into a Q&A about this at 11:50. So if you have questions, you can send them in a remind, or you can come to the Q&A and we'll answer them there. So we'll see you in a little while.